You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1309. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving practice that you absolutely love. In this series, Brandon, one of our consultants, is going to be doing a number of these shows. This is a reverse podcast from his shows that aired over on the Grow Group podcast. So we're really excited to have him take over for a number of weeks with some of these shows, and we just can't wait to have you learn from Brandon. So here we go.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow Group Practice Podcast. This episode is part 2 of the 3-part series that we've been talking about in terms of the 3 components to growth, specifically in the context of being a group practice owner. And there's 4 points on the continuum of being a group practice owner that we touched on in the first part of this series called Mindset. So if you haven't listened to that one, please go back and listen to it, because it'll kind of lay the groundwork really for what I'm going to be covering today in this solo episode. All right. And this second component to growth is so vital to me. I'm so passionate about it because of my very, very direct experience with it, and it being birthed out of, just my way of thinking about things. So similar to the first part, I'm going to define the more traditional or mainstream approaches to discipline. Then I'm going to talk to you about an alternative way to consider and think about discipline. I'm going to share a little bit of my journey with this and my experience with this discipline, the way that I view discipline now. And then also I'm going to give you some strategies, as well as some questions to help cultivate this form of discipline in and of itself, right? So, but before we dive in, I want to give you a little bit of a context about me. This, by all accounts, I'm going to start by here. By all accounts, I should not even be talking to you all today. And so I want to give you a little bit of context about this. And spoiler alert, there are some tragedies or some traumas that I'm going to touch on. I won't go into detail with it, but I do want to share that before I go into them. Right? So here are some highlights from my life. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If you don't know where that's at, it's an urban city just north of Chicago, Illinois. Right. So that's some context, some background. When I was 4, I was deliberately set on fire. When I was 15, I had 3 guns pointed in my face and I was robbed. And then when I was 16, I got shot in the heart and both of my lungs. That is not the reason that I say I shouldn't be here. Right? That's not the reason. I say that I shouldn't be here because while I survived all of those things, right, the burning, the robbery, and then the shooting, I did not survive high school. What do I mean by that? I mean, I dropped out of high school. And that's an important component, because it's not that I wasn't smart enough to complete high school. I had other aspirations. And a little more context, where I grew up and in the time that I grew up, there were mainly 3, as an African-American male, there was mainly 3 acceptable avenues to success. You would either be in sports, you would be in the streets, or you would be in entertainment in some form or fashion. So a rapper, an R&B singer, an actor, something like that. And I had attempted, um, you know, the streets, but I realized that I liked too much of my my freedom, right, to continue and sustain that lifestyle. I never liked sports, right, even though people say I have the build for it. But what I decided or determined that I was really good at was writing music. Very early on in my life, I had a tendency and a knack for hearing a song a couple times and being able to recite the verse word for word. Now, when I was younger, I would say I didn't necessarily know what those words meant, but I had the ability to remember them and keep them. So I was like, this is my ticket. I'm going to make a living as a recording artist. Right? Now, you're listening to this podcast, so the spoiler alert is that I did not become a multi-platinum recording artist. I didn't go that route. It's not that I haven't thought about it, um, and or none of that stuff. So, how am I, as a high school dropout, speaking to you right now? And like, what pearls of wisdom do I have to share? And that's really where it comes to what's something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is discipline. Right? Discipline. So the first thing that I want to do is give you a more traditional or conventional view of or definition of discipline. Right? Go back to the first part of this series. If you don't know, I love sharing and giving definitions so that we're speaking from the same sheet of music. So discipline, as a traditional or more conventional uh, term or definition, the way that it's viewed, is training to act in accordance with rules. So you learn how to follow rules really, really well. It's an exercise, an activity, or a regimen that develops a skill or improves a skill. It's a branch of learning or instruction. It is behavior in accord with rules of conduct and or a set or system of rules and regulations. Right? So an activity, exercise, or regimen that develops a skill or improves a skill, behavior in accordance with rules of conduct, thinking about a set of or system of rules and regulations, a branch of learning or instruction. And what typically comes to mind when you think about a person in that traditional sense? Well, you have elite military members, right? Those special forces folks, those Navy SEALs, those airborne troopers, paratroopers. You can think about Shaolin monks. You know, they're really, really disciplined. Just monks in general are really, really disciplined in the sense of the more conventional way of thinking about discipline. You could think about Olympic athletes. These are the people that they train for years. They train for years to participate in one sporting event. And this is everyone that performs at that level. So you have to be the top of the top, the elite of the elite, if you are going to be an Olympic athlete. That's not something that you just wake up one day and say, you know what? I like running. I'm going to be a track star. Now, it takes a lot of years of cultivating that stamina, that energy, that explosive power, um, depending upon what type of athlete you are looking to be. You have first responders, you know, your SWAT officers, your ambulance or EMS or EMTs, depending upon where you are in the world and how you refer to them. But then you also have your firefighters. All of those people are first responders, and there's a certain discipline that comes with being in those positions. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of training yourself to act in accordance with rules. It's a specific skill set that you develop, and you might have an inclination. You might have the inclination or the mindset to be one of these first responders or Olympic athletes or a Shaolin monk or a military member, but having that inclination in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you will rise to that elite challenge. But who you typically won't think about is me. as a person that is disciplined. And I'll explain that a little bit more. So when I talk about discipline, and I told you that I dropped out of high school, right? So a high school dropout. Ultimately, I'm going to be a recording artist. That was my goal. That was the idea, and I gave you the spoiler alert, right? But that was the beginning. I was in high school. I survived these things, these traumas, if you will, and I determined that when I found out that I was really good at writing music and I had the capacity for it, I decided that I was going to pursue it. And the thing that was in my way was school. Right? I didn't need to learn, in that sense, history or science or anything like that because I was going to be making money hand over fist with my skills as an artist. Again, I'm not there, but I'm speaking to you all here on this podcast. So obviously, I didn't make it. But that was the beginning of my struggle. That was the beginning part of what would ultimately become discipline. It takes a little bit of discipline to sit and write music and write lyrics and get into the studio and do the recordings and all of those things. So that's not what where the fortification came. I was starting this this process really. Now, some other context about me was at this point, I enter a relationship with my then girlfriend, now wife. And, and so she had said, you know what, there's more to you than just music. And after a while, it began to take, right? That little seed was germinating and it began to grow. And so at her behest and, in her prudence, she said, you should go back and get your GED. And eventually I did. And but I want to preface or caveat by saying me dropping out of high school was the probably the best and worst decision that I made. It's not, I'm not saying go and drop out of high school but hopefully if you're listening to this, you've already got all of your degrees and stuff like that. I'm just sharing this as a part of my journey to what I'm talking about in terms of discipline. So dropping out, and then I go back and I decide, she makes a little sense. I should probably go and get my GED. So now I get the GED, and then I'm like, okay, absolutely. The doors are about to fly open for me because now I have this GED. It means that I have a little bit of education because you have to take tests in order to get that. And this, at this point in time, another thing was my then girlfriend, now wife, we got married. And so and with her being in the military, it meant that I was going to be leaving where I was currently living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my hometown. So I leave that. And then I get to this point where now I'm in a new environment without any of the supports that I had in my hometown. But I'm also looking to do something different because I decided that I would rather be married than to make music. And, I'm starting to try to figure out some stuff. The problem with that is I didn't have any other skill set in my mind. I didn't have any other skill set. So enter this struggle part where it became really, really challenging because all of the things that I was attempting to do in life, like getting into law enforcement and other jobs, they were where we were in this new environment. They were not panning out for me. The doors were being closed. And so I'm struggling because I gave up the thing that I was really good at, that I knew I was good at. And I'm finding myself not being able to get where I want to be because I was my thought was always impact. How can I serve? How can I serve? How can I faithfully serve my generation, if I could put it that way? Right. So there was a point where the music was that ability because I would convey some of the ills of the urban life and even my personal struggle in the beginning of life. But then when I moved away from that and I'm in this new environment and doors are closing in a sense, well, I'm deciding to do something different and I have to find out what that was. I was like, okay, where's another place that I can have impact? Right? And so the impact that I began to realize that I would want was the challenge of being in law enforcement. And those doors were closing. I mean, as fast as you could say no. So here I am. I have this desire. I have this passion. I have this GED, and I'm attempting to get into law enforcement, and it just wasn't working out for me. And so I'm in this struggle. I'm frustrated. I'm really, really, I was having a pity party, in just full transparency, because I shared all those other things about me. So I was in a bit of a dip, a slump in my life. Now, I also want to make mention of the fact that none of those things that happened to me is the reason that I entered the mental health space. I entered this space in spite of that. Mental health was not even something that was spoken to me during any of those moments, those pivotal moments earlier in my life. So I'm going through all of this struggle, and I'm frustrated, and doors are closing, and they keep closing. And I'm frustrated, and I'm upset, and I'm questioning, and I'm saying, why is these doors keep continuously closing? But then there was a shift that happened inside of me. There was an internal shift. Something finally clicked. And then at this point, all of the disappointment and the struggle and the closed doors, they had a purpose. And what I didn't know, I couldn't see it at that time, right? There was a process being developed inside of me. Now, so think about diamonds. We ooh and we ah over something that is really rare, but we don't understand the process of it. We can't, most of the time, we don't appreciate the process because the process is painful. You take a carbon element, and it takes about 50,000 times the Earth's atmospheric pressure on that carbon. And it takes about a lot of heat. Let me just put it that way. There's a lot of heat that is required to create this thing that we extract from the earth, that we put in jewelry, and we ooh and we ah over it. It's so brilliant. And the clearer the diamond and the more it sparkles, the better, right? So what is the point of that, right? So I'm talking about this process of developing a diamond, and the how does that process really form discipline? Right? What does that have to do with all of this discipline stuff, the history of chasing dreams and all of those things? Well, I finally land on this idea, and in all honesty, it happened in retrospect when I began to look at my life over the course of time, because now that I've gone from being a high school dropout to obtaining the highest degree that a person can get, right? So you could say I went from a GED to a PhD. There was something that was necessary in all of that struggle and the setback that I didn't see when I was going through it. And that in retrospect, I understand, and it's been really helpful for me. So I've taken discipline and I've created this sentence, if you will. And for me, discipline means determine if success can inspire prolonged lingering inside nasty environments. I'm going to say that one more time. Determine if success can inspire prolonged lingering inside nasty environments.
I want to thank Headway for sponsoring this episode. If you run a group practice, you know that accepting insurance can be overwhelming. Between credentialing, billing, and payroll, the admin side can easily take over your week. Headway was built to help you handle this, and they're the only platform designed specifically for in-network group practices. Whether you're growing your team or running an established practice, Headway makes the business side easier with faster credentialing, higher per session rates, and bi-weekly payments your team can count on. They work with therapy, psychiatric, and hybrid group practices. There are no subscription fees, just the support you need to run your practice with ease. Run your best group practice with Headway, trusted by thousands of group practice leaders to simplify insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. Curious how Headway can work for you? Head to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more.
So that's the thing that happened. Right? I had to determine if success could inspire prolonged lingering inside of nasty environments. And a lot of the time when we talk about nasty, we tend to think of disgusting, filthy, uh, you know, dirt all over the place. And that could be true in a lot of respects. But in this case, and in this instance, nasty really just means it's difficult, it's unwanted, it's unpleasant, right? And that environment can be internal or external. It can be an external environment where maybe you're in a business, or you're working in a job that you don't like, or maybe you are training to become a clinician and you're in a program and you don't like the instructors as much. However, you might come to this conclusion, you have to say to yourself, right? Can success in this area, do I want success enough that I can linger inside of this nasty environment, right? And so I'm talking about what I'm going to suggest will take about as much discipline as anything else, but it is vital. Because if you want to shift from a trying mode to a training mode of thinking, you need to be able to say, you have to determine if success can inspire prolonged lingering inside nasty environments. Now, I had briefly touched on this trying versus training mode or mindset in part one. But I'm going to expand. I'm going to explain what it means to try, and then I'm going to explain what it means to train. So when I talk about trying, it really means to make an attempt or effort to strive to do something. And so on the surface, this is not a bad thing. But what the problem that we run into is that it has a strong association with failure. Okay. So you think about things like this, sayings, third time's the charm, right? 3. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And while those sayings in and of itself, they're not horrible. Again, it's not good or bad. If you're in a trying mode, rather, you have to get to the point, you will get to the point where you will conclude it wasn't meant to be, or any variation of that thought. And as a person that is a group practice owner, a sustained group practice owner, a person that wants to expand into a group practice, there's no shortage of opportunities for you to say things like, I guess it wasn't meant to be. And so ultimately, the number of attempts that you are willing to make, they are often limited, sometimes to 3 tries. Maybe in some extreme cases, it's not even 3 tries. It's the first time out the chute. And so when I was trying to become a rapper, I was trying to become a police officer, I was trying, all of those tries led me to believe that I was unworthy, and it caused me to have this sense of defeat. And although I would get up and dust myself off, the energy that I was willing to devote to the process after time was limited. And when it seemed like school was not going to benefit me, I gave up on trying to get to the end. It wasn't worth the try anymore. It wasn't worth the effort. When I was trying to make it as a rapper, and that appeared to take more work than simply writing lyrics, I gave up. And I even gave up on being a police officer ultimately because I'm in the mental health space. I was looking at the end result and not the process. That's where I was at. I was like, okay, this end result is where I want to be, but I wasn't looking at the process. And so when things didn't go the way that I wanted them to, based on the attempts, I encoded those moments as failures. They were failures. And so you can see those moments in my life, I gave up. But when I switched to a training mindset, it switched for me. So now let me explain what it means to train. So training, by contrast, is to make proficient by instruction and practice, and to develop or form the habits, thoughts, or behaviors through discipline and instruction. Those things that are necessary, specifically as a practice owner and as a group practice owner, in whichever spectrum you might find yourself. And so this carries with it the understanding that the journey will likely take some time, such as when a person is preparing to run a marathon or prepare for the Olympics, like I had talked about a little while ago. And in this case, what you are doing is you are working to bring yourself into the desired form, and that takes time. You don't just go from being a person that sits on a couch all day watching TV to running an ultra marathon. It takes a process. You have to train. And so when I shifted from wanting to arrive somewhere and being impatient about how I was getting there, I began to enjoy the journey. Now, I also understand that training for something happens continuously. So now I'm not looking for an endpoint per se. The the destination is indeed the journey. And now, because I have trained to become a clinical mental health counselor, I continue to train every day to become a better counselor. Now, I went through my dissertation and I had to train to complete that because it was, it was a thing. It wasn't just one and done. It was iterations that I had to go through and revising the content. And I still am not done with that aspect of my life. I'm a full-time professor and I'm training in this position. I didn't, it's a training. I'm constantly getting better. I'm constantly improving. So I don't just sit and say, okay, I made it and I've taught this course once, and so I know how to teach it next time. I'm constantly wanting to do uh, these these additional things. As a consultant, I'm training. It's another level of training for me. And doing this podcast, it's another level of training for me. And so if you listen to part one, where I talked about mindset, and I said, now there's some components about the training side of things. You no longer see failures as failures. Failures are learning opportunities. And then you are also looking and seeking out challenges for the purpose of growth. And now when you think about discipline in this regard, it's a process of developing habits, thoughts, and behaviors. You shift from thinking that you should give up if you have not arrived after making a few attempts, and you look to understand, and you begin to understand that it is more essential that you go through the process. You are training for your own personal Olympics. All right, so I said all that to say discipline. It's not a horrible way that we talk about it. It's not good or bad, it just is. But if you want success, then you have to determine if success can inspire prolonged lingering inside nasty environments. So, love to give some practical things. So, what this is the first question to begin to cultivate a training mindset. What area or areas do I want success in? If you listen to part one, you know that I'm all about locating yourself on your global positioning system so that um, get in a sense of where you are and where you want to be. And this question will help you identify those areas. And then those internal areas could be related to relationships, your work, and other personal areas. And specifically, as a person and as a group practice owner or aspiring group practice owner, you want to know what areas you want success in. Here's some specific questions really to expand on that first question. What does success look like for your practice? What is the big picture goal for your practice? How ready is your environment for where you want to take your practice? So I want you to I'm going to say those again because these are the questions that you really want to identify and sit and spend some time with. What does success look like for your practice? What is the big picture goal for your practice? And how ready is your environment for where you want to take your practice? Okay. So you go through those questions, and now you're really highlighting where you want to go, where you want to take your practice. And then you want to begin to assess the conditions of the environment. Essentially, you want to examine how nasty is this environment currently. So what are the thoughts, the habits, and behaviors that you will need to address? And the dirtier the internal condition, the more energy it is going to take. And it's a reason that you need to say, I'm training and not trying. Because depending upon how many areas you identify, you might want to rank them from the least to the greatest in the amount of work that it's going to take, and then act on the condition that will require the least amount of energy to clean up, so that you can get some more positive results and get some positive increases in your growth. So you want to begin to believe that growth is possible. Now, specifically, what you want to consider is, what are the nasty things that are holding you back currently or slowing down your progress? And it could be a combination of both of them. Then you want to assess, in what ways has your environment supported these nasty things? So two things. What are the nasty things that are either holding you back, slowing down your progress, or a combination of the both? And then, in what ways have your environment supported these nasty things? Not done just yet. We got a couple more for you to look at. Now, so you've identified where the areas you want success. You've assessed the environmental conditions, so to speak, and now you want to begin to explore, how determined am I? You want to get a measure for just how determined you are, because we say we want to get better at things a lot of the time, or we want to do some things a lot of the time, but often we don't consider how much energy it is going to take. Or we look at the amount of effort and decide it's not necessary, that it's not worth the risk of failure. I don't want to fail. And so we don't pursue the job. We don't ask for the raise. We don't pursue the degree. We don't look at the relationship. We don't pursue the relationship. We want to be group practice owners. We want to expand our group practice, but we don't, because the amount of energy that it's probably going to take, I'm not willing, or I'm afraid to put that amount of energy out. Now, specifically, what you want to ask with this third condition or question, with assessing how determined am I, of course, how bad do I want it? That's the first specific question. What goals can you set with a timeline? Right now, all you mental health experts think about SMART goals. Right? So you want to begin to set a timeline for yourself with these goals, because if you don't give yourself a timeline, the likelihood that you are going to take the action is less. How can you position yourself to receive the success you desire? And then how might you position your environment to set it up to receive the success you desire? So positioning yourself is that internal environment, and then positioning your external environment to receive the success that you desire. There's work in both aspects with this thing. The final question that you want to explore, after you've said, these are the areas of success, this is the conditions of the environment, that I've located how determined I am, and I've sat with that question. The fourth question and the final question is, what could prevent me from prolonging my lingering? And this is important, because lingering means you examine yourself honestly. And so if you don't want to face those conditions, those nasty conditions, you know how nasty they are. But you say, you know what, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to sit with it. There are sometimes you can not want to linger. Right? And so this is where I call it, you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Have comfort in the discomfort, really. Now, some specific questions that you want to ask and consider is, how can you get out of your own way? How can you get out of your own way? Do you need coaching or accountability? If so, What are the the programs, the systems, or the communities? What communities do you know of, right? That can provide you the support that is necessary to get into that space, specifically in terms of developing this training mindset that is an offshoot of discipline. And how can you structure your environment to support the lingering that is necessary? So you want to structure your environment to support that becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it all falls back to the environment. If you don't consider these things, then it is really difficult to enter this space and stay with it. If you're not counting the cost, so to speak, of what it's going to take, you're less likely to stick it out. And now discipline becomes a thing that you aspire to develop, but the energy and the effort or the action is not forthcoming, right? So that does it for this part of the 3-part series. Thank you for sticking around with me. Come back in the next section where we'll be kind of wrapping this all up, and we'll explore the third component for the third component to growth that are a part of the 3 components. All right. So thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a good day, and we'll talk soon.
We could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. And today, Headway is our sponsor. If you are looking for help running your practice and want the best group practice you can have, you're going to want to sign up with Headway. They are trusted by thousands of group practice leaders to simplify their insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. If you're curious about how Headway can help work for you, head on over to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.